Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning for all the students who join us with this seminar 5 for our youth education forum for this year. We are very honored to have Victor and Amber as the speakers today for STS, and Hemanth will be the moderator, and then I will introduce Hemanth first, and Hemanth will introduce them. So Hemanth will graduate from our high school a few years back as the Minnesota AP King, and he studied in Harvard, and I think he will be an econ major, and he has been our summer camp teachers and then a winter camp teachers as well in the past years. And okay, Hemanth, you can introduce Victor and Amber.
Actually, Victor and Amber, how about you just tell us a bit about yourself? Victor first.
Hi, my name is Victor Kai. I am the second place winner for the Regeneron Science Talent Search. I have been doing science for 9 years and a lot of research background. I'm also an US Math Olympiad qualifier and a Physics Olympiad bronze medalist. So that's a little bit about me.
Okay, hey guys, I'm Amber. I'm from Long Island and I'm going to MIT in the fall. I'm the Regeneron STS third place winner. I did the USA Biology Olympiad and I made it to camp twice. I also did the Research Science Institute and I won top 5 paper and top 5 presentation there. And then I also did Amy a couple times, but I was never that good at math competitions. And I have I did my first science fair actually in senior year. So technically I've only been doing research for about a year. So yeah.
Okay. So yeah. I hear that 1 second place and 1 third place. So I hope this is a friendly competition here. Nothing to no anger. Yeah. So I'm Hemanth. Like Dr. Guo said, I'm a junior at Harvard. So it's been a little while since I've been involved in all the science fair stuff. But yeah, so basically how this is going to work is, oh God, this is not going to be pretty. Should have squashed this beat beforehand. So basically how this is going to run is Victor and Amber are the experts on STS here. I will guide the conversation, guide the answering questions, but we're going to have them be the real resources on specific STS related questions. 2 things, RSI, go RSI, Amber, and go Harvard, Victor. So I like both of you for different reasons. So we can get started with the slide deck then. Sound good?
Yeah, so I'll share screen now for the slide deck. Nah, RSI is better than Harvard.
Let me hear your presentations first, then I'll choose science.
Okay, can everyone see this? Yes. Okay,
Yes.
I'm gonna assume that's yes. All right, awesome. So I guess we kind of already introduced ourselves, but hi again. I'm Amber and Victor's obviously also here. So yeah, we're just gonna talk a little bit about our own experiences in research and in STS. And basically we're just gonna give an introduction to STS, how to apply, how to find a mentor for STS, and talk a little bit about our own research. So I'll let Victor take it away.
All right, so this is the presentation outline. So first we did the introductions, and then we'll introduce our research. Next we'll go through some research fairs and tips, and where you can present your research, and some tips on how to approach that. Then we'll dive into my research in narrowband radar, followed by Amber's research in biology and computing. And finally, we'll end with the question answer session with a lot of the questions that you have already submitted, as well as some live questions. So starting with my research experience, I've been doing science fair projects since elementary school. So this leftmost image is of my 5th grade science fair project, where I made a small hydraulic crane out of syringes, and it's holding an eraser up there. And so through these little projects that I've been doing since elementary school, I found my passion in engineering. These middle 2 images are of my 8th and 9th grade science fair project, where I built a sun tracking solar panel and the associated charging system. And you can see the complicated circuit I have at the bottom there, but that was over my 2 years project in creating this, and both the hardware and the software side. So by 9th grade, I was exploring what area of engineering that I wanted to go into. And that happened to be electrical engineering with building these sorts of systems. And the rightmost image here is of my most recent project, my 10th and 11th and technically 12th grade science fair project. I'm building a short-range narrowband radar. And so I'll speak a little bit about that. So in 10th grade, as an overview, I made this science fair project, and I built the system and the algorithm and so on. And I took this project and I wrote a paper and submitted it to the GNU Radio conference, which was a conference for the software that I was using to code my radar. And at that conference, I met my to-be mentor. His name was John Kraft, with Analog Devices, and he eventually asked me to apply for an internship at Analog Devices, which is I believe it's the 2nd largest semiconductor analog semiconductor company, and so I applied for that, and I got a co-op offer over my that was over the my summer after 11th grade, and during that time I developed my radar further, and then wrote another paper for the GNU Radio conference on some of my improvements. And this eventually led to my STS project. So that's a bit of overview on my projects.
Okay, so just quickly, just a show of like hands, raise hands, zoom hands. Who here is like interested in the engineering side? Because I know there's a lot of people more in the science side. Who here is more interested in the engineering sort of aspect of this? Oh, we're seeing some hands. Yeah, engineering it's a very different discipline. So if anyone has any questions after we hear from Amber, make sure to ask like some specific things about about your interests, like whether it's more the building stuff, how do you get into that, versus more of the research side, like biology, chemistry, because they are pretty different paths. So Amber, how about we hear from you now?
All right, awesome. So as for my research experience, while Victor like actually made physical things with his research, I have absolutely nothing physical to show for my research because all of it was computational. And so basically, before I start like actually talking about the things I did in my research, just to preface, like I feel like a lot of people, when they think about biology research or science research in general, they think about wet lab biology, which is where like you pipette things and you do cell culture and stuff like that. That's cool, right? I did not do any of that in my research. All of it was analyzing biological data or even like public health data via computational techniques. So it was basically just writing a lot of code. And while Victor was like an electrical engineer, I was like a software engineer. I created things, but it was all code. So basically, just a little overview of what I did. Basically, in in between 10th and 11th grade, I went to this summer math program called MathWorks Honors Summer Math Camp. Ironically, Victor went to the same program, but we were like in different years. And my second year there, I got to do a research project in the field of computational epidemiology. And what I did is, this was the year of like COVID-19. So this camp was virtual and everyone was like going crazy over COVID. So obviously like my project was about COVID. And all I did like, I made some statistical models to relate like COVID-19 incidence and mortality, which is like how quickly it spreads and how fatal it is, to socioeconomic and health related factors, such as like the percentage of people who smoked in a county, or the average income in a county, or the proportion of white people, African Americans in a county. And I use these factors to kind of predict how fatal or how quickly COVID-19 would spread. And so basically this is where I learned how to use the software. It's not a software, the data science language R. I learned like basic presentation skills, and the most important is that I learned how to write a paper and how to work in a group, how to communicate with a mentor. Also, yeah, I learned R, and that was like actually like extremely important. So then the next summer, after I did this research project, this is like during the school year. So during junior year, I also cold emailed, which is like you just like send a million emails to a bunch of professors and you're like, please let me work in your lab. Basically, like I cold emailed this mentor at Stony Brook University, and I work with him to basically simulate cells with differential equations, is the easiest way to explain it. It was like chemical simulations. And although I didn't get a paper, I also like didn't present it anywhere, I found his research to be like so interesting and so inspiring in a way. I mean, you're literally like creating a biological system out of equations. And I just found that mind-blowing. And so I remember I wrote all of my essays, both like college essays and applying to research programs, about this kind of concept of using math to understand biology. And that is what led to my internship at the Research Science Institute, or RSI. Basically here, it's a 6-week long program and you work one-on-one with like a mentor. So my mentor was from UT Austin, and basically what I did is I created like a software, or a computational tool is what it's probably supposed to be called, that analyzes something called ribosome pause sites. And I will go into detail about it. It's a little bit technical, but basically I just made a software to understand biology. And then I wrote a paper. I submitted the paper to a conference, and then this led to STS and ISEF. And I used this project I did at RSI to bring it to science fairs. And now I'm like interning at Regeneron, where I'm doing research with like single cell data. Cool. So the takeaway is that I did a lot of research programs, which is how I got into research. And I've only been doing research for 2 years and science fairs for 1 year. Okay, so enough about myself. You guys are all here to learn about science fairs, and that's what I'm going to talk about now. So you guys have probably heard the big names, right? Like ISEF, STS. I'm sure some of you are at least like familiar or have heard of it before. And if you haven't, like that's completely okay. So I will, and then there's another one called JSHS, or Junior Science and Humanities Symposium, which is similar to ISEF. So I'm just going to briefly talk about all 3 of these science fairs. So basically, ISEF is what you usually think of when somebody says science fair, right? It's like the big, like people call it the Olympics of science fair. There's like a bunch of categories. I don't know, like 20 or 30. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. Some large number of categories, anything ranging from like robotics to cellular biology to physics to astrophysics to math. They got everything, and people submit projects in every category, and it's international, meaning people from Saudi Arabia, people from China, America obviously participate in ISEF. And so basically how it works is it's a science fair at its core. It's not a science talent search, it's a science fair. So you have your poster, like you've done research, you make a poster, and then you present to judges. So basically like the first stage of ISEF is that there's going to be a regional fair, or like your local fair. So for me, that's the Long Island Science and Engineering Fair. So if you first go and you compete at this local fair, and everyone is welcome to submit research and compete, you have your poster, you present to some judges, and then they pick the top like 2 or 3 projects in each category, depending on how large your fair is. And then if you score in the top in your category, then you get to go to ISEF. That's basically the core of it. And there's a lot of restrictions for like how long you get to talk to judges and things like that, which I think we'll go more into detail about. But basically, another difference or about ISEF is that like the monetary prizes are not huge. Like when you make it to ISEF, you can win up to like, I think it's like up to 75K. But that's only for like the top 3. If you win like first in your category at ISEF, you only get like 5,000. I mean, that's a lot. $5,000 is a lot. But compared to STS, like it's a little different. And then basically for STS or Regeneron STS, which Victor and I both did. I also did ISEF this year. But basically like it's not a science fair in the traditional sense. I would call it more of like a science college application. Like there's no like, in order to make it to the finalist stage, there's no poster presentation. It's just like a written application with like your paper is the most important. Oh yeah, for ISEF, like your presentation skills are the most important. But for STS, your paper is what's the most important. You submit your paper, a bunch of essays, recommendation letter, and this, okay, STS is open only to seniors. I probably should have mentioned that. It's open only to seniors, and then you submit like a long written application, and we'll go more into it. But basically, like it's just your written application, kind of. And then for JSHS, it's similar to ISEF. It's just not as good. Sorry, what did I say? Well, in my opinion, it's not as good, but it's still a good science fair. You know, it's not as well known as ISEF. In my opinion, the judging is not done as well. But it's still like a good fair, and they provide like larger monetary prizes. They have an alumni network. It's similarly run to ISEF. So this is just kind of like a summary of how each of these science fairs is actually run. Again, like ISEF has a regional fair where you submit like, for the regional fair, sometimes you don't have to submit a video, but it varies like region to region. So make sure like you search up what your region requires, whether it needs a video or if it wants you to go in person to present a poster. Each of them is different. But at ISEF, they're all pretty much the same, where you do a poster presentation. And then STS is written application, and then from there they select 40 finalists, 40 finalists, all of them receive 25K, and 300 scholars that all receive 2K. And then from there, the finalists attend this like retreat / competition / fun thing in Washington, D.C., where they select the top 10 winners out of the 40 finalists. And then, yes.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna wait. Are you talking about JSHS?
Yeah.
Yes. Here, go ahead.
If you're okay. And then JSHS is like similar to ISEF, except there sometimes are like multiple regional fairs, and like I said, I believe the judging, at least for my region, was not as good as for ISEF. But then again, it may vary region to region, and it's still like a very good science fair, and I highly recommend doing JSHS if you're also like doing ISEF. All right.
Oh wait. Let's pause here just for a second to get a few questions. Just a quick summary. So ISEF mostly about projects, about the presentation, and it's open to all high schoolers, 9th to 12th grade. STS, like a college application / research paper application, only for seniors. And JSHS it's about the presentation, but it's also about the paper, more focus on that. And that's Amber has I think a little bit of an agenda against it, but that's an alternative thing, and it's usually done in parallel with ISEF. So are there any questions here? I know there was a lot of different information. Anything, you can just raise your hand right in the chat. Otherwise, we will move on. Okay, cool beans. So the next slide is, don't read this. Not very helpful. But I do want to briefly just highlight some of the more fundamental building blocks, kind of like Victor's and Amber's longer term paths to getting to this point. I know a lot of the people watching this are either in like middle school or they have children in middle school. So I want to make sure to you get the idea of not just the final stages, but some of the things you should get involved with to build up to it, even if it has nothing to do with a project you'll do in your senior year to go to STS. Like just like how Amber was talking about how she like the thing that kind of got her inspired into that field was something very different and it was separate from all of that. Okay, so could we just go to the next slide then? So just like these are the building blocks of good scientific research. I just want to quickly highlight them. So the first and most important thing is thinking about ideas and finding ideas that interest you. I'll get to the questions in a minute or so. So I've seen a lot of people, they kind of get half-hearted into their projects. Like they'll take on these big projects, but they won't really care about them because it wasn't in a topic that interested them. They just did it because they felt like they have to do science fair or something. Like science fair is great. You learn a lot. It's useful for like going to college and your careers and everything, but you're not really going to get that much out of it if you don't have like that much like interest in what you're doing. So I really, really encourage, especially for middle schoolers, that you start with topics that interest you, fields that interest you, YouTube channels that interest you, and build from there, whether it's for engineering or from a more scientific pursuit. So learning how to find fields that interest you, like thinking, oh yeah, I really like how electrical engineering works. I really think it's cool how circuits work or something like that. Then the next step is figuring out what do you wonder about? What is confusing to you? Why doesn't something work the way it should? How could you build a product or solve a problem? Think about those hypotheses. Try to start to question, where is the limit of the current research, or where is there's a hole and you want to fill it, you want to figure out what's going on there. And that's where that should be the seed of your initial projects, especially in middle school. Of course, once you move on to high school and stuff, more of this will involve, like Amber and Victor mentioned, collaborations with professors or research programs, and I recommend you pursue those. But especially when you're starting out earlier, make sure to start up from this idea of what am I interested in and what doesn't make sense? Like, what do I want to solve? What do I want to figure out? Oh, wait, let's go to the next slide then. So just basically from here, the main things, also, by the way, I'm just going to text in the chat a link to this outline in case that'll help you. So basically, overall is once you have that, figure out what's feasible. Like some problems you're just not going to be able to solve, especially as a middle schooler. So think about, like, of the problems I have, of the questions I want to answer, what could I actually do something about it in like the time frame I have in like the next few months? What's something that I can, like, I mean, I can't afford maybe a jet engine, but like what's something I can afford, like materials I can afford, something my teacher or my parent or one of my parents' friends can help me out with. And build off of the most feasible but also interesting idea. Don't overreach into something that you can just never answer. So make sure to have a reasonable goal. That's something that you can actually feel like you can do. Outline what you're going to do, outline your methodology, make sure it's something you can afford and you can do in a reasonable time frame. Part of this process is making sure you get approval. It's important, especially in middle school, that you know about the SRC and other approval pathways. Make sure you like early on in the process, you figure out does your project involve human subjects or animals or anything. You're going to need to get approval for all of that. So make sure that's done in advance. Okay, of course, you have to do the experiment. You have to put yourself on a schedule. It's always easy. At least I know from personal experience how often it's easy to push those things off. So make sure you try to do that earlier on. And then I think that's the next slide is the last slide. So at this point, presentation really is not only a very, very important thing, as Amber mentioned, for like ISEF. But it is just fundamentally, in my opinion, perhaps like the most or one of the most important skills of the entire process. Like you can't be a great researcher or change the field or even win most of these awards without being a good writer and especially a good speaker. So don't undervalue the speaking practice part, especially when you're younger. This is a skill you have to build up over years. So starting with your middle school presentations, focus a lot of your time, leave yourself time to present your like draft slide deck or something to your parents, to your family, friends, everyone, to yourself, record it, and revise your speaking practices. Learn how to answer the tough questions from your audience. Do all that sort of stuff. Like the speaking practice part is not only really, really important for having a great presentation, but it's also just an extraordinarily valuable skill as you move on. And then of course, like Amber outlined some of these later steps, how you get to ISEF, the STS thing in senior year, but that's about it. So I saw we had a few questions. Let me direct them towards Amber and Victor. So if a student is in a private school, how does he or she participate in ISEF since there is no local round to participate?
Yes, so with ISEF, that should be unrelated with your school. There's no I don't think there's like a school round that you have to participate in. You just go directly to the regional round.
Oh yeah, one thing I did want to know, yeah, great question. So there is no like school round to participate in, but for some like larger schools, like my school, for example, a lot of fairs set a quota of the max number of projects that can come out of a school. My school, for example, this year we had a quota of 11 and we had 22 people who wanted to submit to the regional fair. So we had to do like in-house like auditions for science fair. So your school might do that if you're like a big research area. Be aware that there can be quotas for each school, but like that doesn't differ between private schools and public schools. Like the local round is determined by where you live, not what school you go to. At least
Yeah.
No, sorry, it is determined by what school you go to, but it's like private schools don't have their own thing going on.
Yeah, so like Amber was saying, some schools do filter at like local fairs or things like that. But almost in all cases, if you just email or like get in touch with like the fair director of the regional fair and just tell them like I'm going to this private school and do this early on, like months before the fair, and they'll usually be accommodating and be able to fit you in. If not, there's going to be multiple regional fairs throughout your probably in your area, and I'm sure one of them will understand like your situation. Okay, last question. Suitable age for applying to RSI. I'll just answer that quickly. Apply when you're in 10th grade. When you're in 11th grade. By January of 11th grade. You can apply earlier, but almost no one will ever get in. Yeah, Amber, anything to add about RSI?
I think I can maybe address questions about RSI at the end. I think we're running a little tight on time, but yeah, like only apply junior year. I think they even said like you're not allowed to apply any other year.
Yep.
I started my research 2 years ago. I see someone asking. My research for STS, I spent about 4 months on it, and I started last summer. But in total, I've been doing research for about 2 years. Okay, I see a couple direct messages to me. I'll answer those as Victor is speaking, but we have to hurry up a little so that we can get through all our slides.
Yep. Yeah. And just a quick pub, apply to RSI. It's a great program. Okay,
Yes.
let's move on.
Okay. All right.
Right, so here are some of the rules and requirements for the Regeneron STS. So the most important thing here is that your work should be independent, should be an independent original research project. So what they want to see is a project, ideally that you are leading, and so no team projects. Project where you are really taking the initiative to lead the project and to do most of the work. One exception here is that you can have an individual extension of a team project. So if you had a team project and then you do a continuation on your own, then that is still eligible, that individual portion. You will see in the application that they make a big deal about differentiating between what you have done and what others have done, and acknowledging what others, where others have helped you, while also justifying where your own research comes in. That being said, you may have a mentor. You're allowed to get help, just that the main thrust of the work should be yours. Any project over any time length in any year of your schooling is allowed, including continuation projects. Now, usually your most recent project will be your most advanced, but any project is eligible. And then it may be a project from a paid or unpaid research program, i.e. RSI. For paid, you are required to disclose it, although for unpaid, you probably should as well, just for the sake of transparency. Finally, there are additional documentation and approval that you'll need for projects involving human participants, animals, or potentially hazardous materials. So do be aware of that, and more specifics are on their website. So these are some of the components of the Regeneron STS application. Warning, it is very long, and you should start as early as you can, ideally like now if you're applying for next year's. This first component is with the recommendations and transcripts. You are required at least one project recommendation, and up to two. That can be a mentor or someone who is closest to your research, and who knows what you've been doing in the lab or elsewhere. And then there's 1 to 2 educator recommendations. That's for a high school teacher or counselor, or someone who knows you in the classroom. And finally, a high school report, which is for your high school counselor to basically upload your transcript. There's rules wizard, forms, the 20-page research report, 20-page max, I should say, which does not include title, abstract, and bibliography. So that will be the thrust of your work in writing up your research in less than 20 pages. And then there are a variety of essays and short answer responses, some relating to your project, many relating to how your research developed, and the timeline of your research, and whether you had a mentor, and what's the story behind how you met your mentor, and how your mentor helped you, and in what areas they helped you. As well as there's a lot of areas where you can put in your previous research or publications if you have them, as well as any programs you've participated in. And then also activities, interests, awards. So as you can see, a lot of this is similar to a college application where you have a lot of essays, except there's also this research report, which is also considered.
So I will get started on the slide right after I finish typing this answer in the chat. Okay. All right. So I saw a couple people asking in the chat about how to find a mentor for things like STS. I think this is okay. So first, to preface this, in my opinion, I think working with a mentor is extremely important for conducting like rigorous and like like rigorous research that also helps you learn a lot about the subject field. But I know a lot of people do research without mentors. I've never done it personally. But I think like obviously it's certainly doable. People have been very successful with research projects that they conceive and do on their own. And it's certainly something you can do. But in general, I think the majority of projects are guided by mentors. And I think at least it's a good place to start. So there's two main strategies that people employ to find mentors, and those would be cold emailing and summer programs. So I think we've talked a little about summer programs, so I'm going to start with that. Basically, so a list of programs is not provided later in these slides, but after the presentation, I can send out a list. But basically, okay, so for summer programs, essentially, a lot of these programs open up in your junior year, although I do know of a couple that open in sophomore year. And basically how it works is like, it's like a mini college application again, like you basically apply, and usually these research programs, like I'll put a couple in the chat, like RSI, SSP, BU Rise. I think there's like Clark Scholars, Passwords, HSMC. I don't know, there's like a whole ton. UCSB. These are all like relatively well-known research programs. If anybody knows of them, put them in the chat. But basically like you apply and they'll ask you probably for a couple essays, any previous research experience, definitely a couple rec letters. And occasionally, like I know RSI asks for a research paper that you've previously written, but it's optional. And basically like the reason I feel like, in my opinion, I think trying to apply for summer programs is better than cold emailing, because like when you do research through a summer program, a lot of the time I found when I cold email mentors, like you start working together and then over time they get busy, you get busy, the project falls apart, or like you don't make very much progress because there's no like set deadline. You have to have your paper due on this time, you have to have this due here. For summer programs, you have strict deadlines, you have an alumni network, you have a support network, you have like other people who are going through the same thing as you, and then you have a mentor who is also being held accountable to deadlines. So when you work at one of these, when you go to one of these summer programs, like they'll match you with the mentor. Each of them has their own method of doing it. For some of them, you apply to a mentor. For others, you just talk about what you want to research and they match you with a mentor. But basically, like you meet with your mentor, and in addition to that, you get like instruction on how to present, how to write a paper, you get a bunch of friends, right? And then also like the reason why I feel like this summer programs generally produce like high quality research projects is because like you have a very short amount of time, 6 weeks, and they require, a lot of them require you to have a paper and a presentation done by the end of the program. And so like you have these strict deadlines, and also you want to do well because you know you applied to this program, you got in, like you have something to prove. So throughout the course of the program, it's like a crunch. It's like a pure 6 weeks of research. And that often I find like brings out people's passions in a topic and allows, at least like, and creates an enabling environment for people to do high quality research. So summer programs are great. Getting into summer program is the hard part. A lot of these are highly selective and often require like award. Well, they don't require awards. Oftentimes like awards help, like if you do Olympiads, if you do Science Bowl, if you've done research in the past, that can help you. But ultimately, like if you're passionate, if you have good essays, like you can definitely get into one of them. So I highly recommend applying to summer programs.
Yeah,
The
just
other
I was just gonna quickly add, just like, so summer programs, yeah, they're like just they're terrific for every reason Amber said, but three things: one, they're very competitive; two, they are often like very like short; and three, they are many of them are expensive. Like RSI is great because it's completely free. RSI is about 6 weeks. Many of them are about 6 weeks, but they do cost money. So it's really important to remember that's a factor too. Just overall, like I think like you really shouldn't necessarily think that summer programs are impossible to get into just because their application rates are really low. many of these programs fully understand that students haven't done like super advanced research. They haven't won top prizes. They haven't published like in like Nature or whatever. Like they're not expecting any of that. Many of these programs want to see first and foremost a real passion towards a specific scientific subject, like a demonstrable passion that you actually know something about that subject and you really like it. Like for me, it was neuroscience because I was super into that when I applied to RSI. Or something like that. So again, I really want to stress it's about like a lot of this about applications, and a lot of it is about personal passion and a demonstrated passion more so than like big credits or super like flashy resumes.
Yes, 100% agree. So yeah, I especially like that you brought up that some of them are costly. Most of them are very costly. And I think I probably should have touched on that, especially I think BU Rise, it's a great program, but it's like 10K for the summer or something equally crazy. So do be aware that a lot of these are very costly. And the ones that are free or that give a stipend are also extremely hard to get into. So that's why we also have cold emailing, which for another option. So basically, I've done both of these. And for cold emailing, what you do is you sit down and you have your email template. If anybody wants like the email template for cold emailing, feel free to like message me on Discord or something. But basically, like, you just like send out like a bunch of emails to professors at nearby universities, or like if you're okay with working virtually computationally, like you can email professors around the nation. But basically like you send out emails to professors and you're like, hi, like I'm in high school, I'm really interested in your research. You talk about their research because obviously professors are happy if you flatter them. And you're like, hey, like I love your research and I'm like really interested in this field. I have like this experience. And it doesn't have to be research experience. Like when I cold emailed mentors, I talked about Science Olympiad and Biology Olympiad and how that made me interested in their field of research. And you just like pray that somebody will take you on. So like basically, I think cold emailing, like you basically email a mentor and you ask them if you can work with them either over the school year or over the summer or for like an undefined period of time to conduct a research project. And a lot of times like you want to emphasize that you are interested in what they are doing, because a lot of professors, like, you know, for a faculty at, you know, a university or like a professor, they're extremely busy, and mentoring a high school student takes a lot of time. So I feel like one thing I always emphasize in my emails is how I want to be able to contribute to their lab and not how they can help me. I think that's something extremely important to kind of remember. Also, use your connections. Like if your parents are professors at a university, or if like you know somebody else's mom is like a professor and they know someone, like it's not bad to have connections. And it's especially good when you use your connections, because I find that's like often the easiest way to, you know, get a mentor. I've had like 3 mentors that are not from summer programs, and I think one of them was via a connection and 2 of them were via cold emailing. So yeah, there's like some tips here. I won't read them all for the sake of time. But something that's really important that I want to touch upon is I think it's a good idea to try to reach out to mentors who've previously mentored like STS winners or ISEF finalists, or sorry, STS scholars / finalists and ISEF finalists. These people, like you can actually search them up. Like if you search up Stony Brook University Regeneron STS finalist, it'll give you a list of like previous finalists from Stony Brook who have worked with professors at Stony Brook University and the names of the professors. And the reason why I think this is a good idea is because somebody who's previously mentored a high schooler knows what it's like, and it's also more willing to take on another one, especially if the one they took on last time was successful. And also like because they've previously worked with a high schooler, they're going to be better at mentoring, and you'll have a better experience, and they're also more likely to say yes. So I think that's something pretty important to keep in mind. So
just one quick thing to add. So I just want to stress, like, some of you might feel like, oh yeah, my resume is not RSI, Olympiad, all these fancy things. I mean, my resume wasn't biology Olympiad finalist or any of those things. So, but I do want to stress that one thing that can really help, like beyond connections, that can really help is going local, because there's always a university or a hospital or like engineering firm nearby. They might have like a local connection there, and even if they like might not have mentored people before, like sometimes local can help. And two, is really when you start a mentorship, if you manage to get one, really make sure you demonstrate in like the early weeks that you've researched that field, you know what you're talking about, because that's the difference between like being the guy who cleans beakers and the guy who does something actually interesting. So so when you start one of these things, it's not just about applying, it's about proving to the mentor that you actually deserve like attention at a higher level, and you deserve a project that's more involved. You know what you're talking about, so that part is really important too.
Yes. Okay, so I think we should move on to next slide. If anyone has questions about this stuff, you can ask in the Q&A, which we may not have time for. Okay. All right. I don't know, does Victor want to like pitch in a little bit? If you have anything to say, feel free to like pitch in. But just really quick, a little Venn diagram comparing like cold emailing and summer programs, like a summary of the last slide. We'll go quickly. So basically, like I think they're both kind of hard, honestly, to find a mentor through, but I think in general, like summer programs are more quote unquote competitive in the normal sense, whereas I feel like if you cold email enough mentors, you can probably find one. And then I think some of these are like kind of subjective. Some summer programs, like it's hard to say. Like I know of many summer programs actually that take people who don't have research experience. I mean, that's the point of a summer program, is to be maybe your first research experience. So I think in general, like summer programs usually actually don't require as much previous research experience, because a lot of professors in my experience like will be reluctant to take you on if you've never done research before. And then obviously like summer programs, connections will help most of the time. And then summer programs include classes, which is really helpful. It teaches you how to write and how to present in addition to how to do research. And then this is a little subjective, like higher success rates for research competitions, but I like in my observation, I think this is somewhat true, but that doesn't mean that like that absolutely does not mean that you can't have a successful project via cold emailing a mentor or working without a mentor. Like those are both amazing opportunities. But I think in general, like summer programs do tend to produce like higher quality research. And then, yeah, they're both time consuming. They can both be amazing, rewarding, valuable. Yes. Okay.
I'll just say,
So,
yeah, I'll just say briefly that I have technically never used cold emailing, although I think I mentioned this earlier at my when I published my first paper. It was in a conference, and at the end of the conference, I left my email, and I was basically like, "Hey, does anyone have an internship they want to take me on, or a mentor, anything like that?" And I actually got like I think it was like 3-4 offers for internships. And so that was how I had met my my mentor for going towards my STS project. So although that's not really cold emailing, sort of going to conferences is also a way to get your name out there in a similar sort of fashion. I have done several of these summer programs. They're definitely have been very helpful towards getting to know how research works on a formal level. And they also, of course, look very good on your resume.
Yeah, and just to give the like the last third perspective, like for me, it was like, at least initially, a lot of this was like still projects I did myself, like at home or in like a school like little setup or something like that. So like they were definitely like less proper research projects, but I still learned a lot from them. And I think for younger students, you should definitely like consider like, oh, it's not just like research lab or nothing. You should consider developing your skills, learning the field. Like I did some like bio stuff, some more engineering stuff, and I learned a lot from like having to figure all of that out myself. So I would definitely recommend that, especially for younger students. I also didn't do much cold emailing. Like my first like research, like formal research was like with somebody who worked with my sister. I just like asked them, and then like again, like since I knew they worked with my sister, they were more likely to work with me. And like that was like where I started. Then RSI was like the next thing, like working with a mentor there, having more proper research experience. So again, a lot of different avenues. Most important thing is you figure out what works in your area. Do you have a lot of research institutions? Do you need to go remote? Like think about your area, think about your circumstances, think about who you know, and then decide what's optimal there. That'll get you something in a field you're interested in. That's the most important thing.
Yeah. And one thing I wanted to comment is like my school had a research program and they actually like required everyone to cold email or somehow find a mentor by junior year. And like if you didn't find a mentor, you get kicked out of the program. It's kind of brutal. But like I know like every single person I know was able to find a mentor by cold emailing. So I think that kind of speaks a little bit to, you know, the power of emailing people. But yeah, there's many different paths to finding a mentor. There's no like right path, wrong path. It's just whatever path you find yourself ending up in. And I think like all three of us have had very different journeys in research. So yeah, that kind of ends the finding a mentor segment. Let's see. So Victor, what do you think about, should we talk about our research or should we just like
just briefly, yeah.
Okay, sure.
So I'll just explain the first slide basically. So my research is in specifically building a short-range narrowband radar. And what that entails is that a traditional radar, you usually think of like the long distance detecting airplanes in kilometer range. However, more recent radar innovations have been moving towards short-range radar for things like autonomous vehicles or for other short-range detection purposes. And for these, using the same traditional algorithms won't work as effectively, since these algorithms require a lot of bandwidth. And so they'll be interfering with other wireless devices around them. And specifically for the example of self-driving cars, if your cars are both using the same frequencies, then they might interfere with each other's measurements and crash. And so my research has been going into how to reduce that bandwidth requirement. And that was through an algorithm called MFCW, which stands for multiple frequency continuous wave, which uses the two different frequencies with slightly different wavelengths, and then measures the phase difference between them in order to measure the distance. And then also another thing that I did in my second year of research for this project was some leakage cancellation techniques, which were established in my second junior radio paper. And I don't think we will have time to go into those, but we can move to the next slide. This is my setup. I just thought I'd show you guys. This is all homemade. We have the cans as the transmit antennas, and we have all these wires going everywhere. So this is sort of my research style for the most part through science fairs, was putting together things by myself at home and then making things work. And that has worked reasonably well. So that's the hardware side. And then for the next slide, I have my software, which we basically is just the stuff I said on the first slide, but actually implemented. So the next slide is my results. So I guess I don't really have time to really talk about it, but the red line there, this dark red line is the final result, is the most accurate my radar has been. Where on the x-axis here, we have the actual target distance, and then the y-axis is what my radar measures. So it's within, I think it's 10, 12 centimeters at this point. And from a theory standpoint, this is actually amazing given the amount of bandwidth that it uses. It's able to achieve the same accuracy as a traditional radar while using 100,000 times less bandwidth. So that's the gist of my project. And we can skip this next conclusion slide.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Awesome, amazing. I don't know anything about radars, but that was
Thank
cool.
you. I don't know anything about ribosomes, but it's all good.
Yeah, so this is where I talk about RiboBase, which is like this software that I made. So basically these are the slides I use for like ISEF. But I will just like speed run them for the sake of time. Okay, so basically like in my project, I created this, what do I even call it? I'm gonna call it like a computational software. And what it does is like you put in a bunch of biological data. So like when you conduct a biology experiment, right, you get a bunch of data. And in this case, it's data about ribosome movement. And I'll explain what that is in a second. But basically you put in a bunch of data and the software I made gives you a bunch of analyses, like graphs, results that basically tell you the underlying secrets behind your data. And so by doing this, like we're able to understand these crazy amounts of messy biological data using math and statistics and look at like the actual patterns that are happening in the data. So that's what my software does. And so how did I do that? Okay, so basically just a brief overview. So let's think about a disease like pancreatic cancer, right? So in patients with pancreatic cancer, one of the most important things that we want to understand as researchers is how is each gene, like how does regulation of each gene change in patients with pancreatic cancer? Like which genes are expressed more, which genes are expressed less, and like what does this imply for the patients, right? So traditionally, we've used these techniques like RNA-seq and DNA microarray, which actually, in order to gain this like kind of big picture understanding of how gene expression changes in diseases. And what these technologies essentially do is they use mRNA abundance as a proxy for protein expression. So proteins are what actually like do things inside a cell, right? And so what we really want to understand is how protein levels change in disease states. But for like decades now, we've been using these technologies that measure mRNA abundance instead of protein in order to kind of understand how gene expression changes. Now, the issue is that recent studies have shown that the correlation between mRNA abundance and protein expression is like very bad. It's like 0.37. And what that tells us is that firstly, like there's a lot of what we call post-transcriptional regulation, which is like regulation that occurs in between the step between mRNA and protein that these technologies we've been using for decades are unable to pick up on. And that secondly, we need better technologies to assess protein abundance. And so this leads us to the development of what we call ribosome profiling. So unlike RNA-seq, which like sequences every single mRNA transcript equally, regardless of if one is like translated into protein more effectively, ribosome profiling or RiboSeq like manages to overcome this limitation of being unable to like account for translational efficiency by essentially like counting the number of ribosomes on each mRNA transcript and factoring that in to how many times each transcript is counted. So for a less technical explanation, like RNA-seq basically accounts only for mRNA abundance, but ribosome profiling actually manages to capture how effectively each mRNA transcript is actually translated. And this is important because ribosome profiling allows us to create these things called coverage plots. So coverage plots look like this. And what they tell us, so there's one of these coverage plots for all of the like 20,000 genes in each cell. So for example, this coverage plot might be for like gap DH or something. And on the x-axis here, we have the location along the transcript. So the start codon is like right there and the stop codon is right there. And on the y-axis, we have the number of ribosome footprints mapping to each particular position. And a ribosome footprint is basically, you can think of it as like the a ribosome. So like basically the higher the number here, the more ribosomes that were found at this particular position. And so we usually see peaks at the start codon and at the stop codon because ribosomes tend to pause there. And so if a ribosome pauses somewhere, you're more likely to find it there, right? So usually we have peaks at the start codon, at the stop codon. Great. But occasionally we'll see something like this, where there's like a peak kind of in the middle of our data. And this is an anomaly because ribosomes, I don't know, I didn't think they paused in the middle of, synthesizing a protein, but apparently they do. And the reason why we care about these kind of peaks in the middle of our data is because these are what we call ribosome pause sites. They're literally like positions where ribosomes pause as they're translating. And the reason why we care about that is because ribosome pause sites have actually been linked to a diverse array of cellular functions ranging from mRNA decay to chaperone-mediated protein folding, and they've even been hypothesized to be caused by the presence of charged amino acids. But the questions that remain are like, firstly, how can we identify the locations where ribosomes pause? And second, like, what causes a ribosome to pause? And third, like, why do we care? Meaning, like, what kind of links might ribosome pausing have to disease? Right. So another thing that we're especially interested in ribosome pausing is when a ribosome pause site changes across conditions. For example, if we knock out or we overexpress a protein and there's like a pause site that's here that wasn't there before, or maybe this pause site like disappeared, what that tells us is like whatever protein we knocked out or overexpressed is interacting with this mRNA transcript at this exact nucleotide position 49. And that's the power of ribosome profiling, and that like it can give you extremely high resolution like views on exactly where these like molecular interactions are occurring. Like this protein is interacting with this mRNA transcript at this exact nucleotide position, and we're able to see that in the data. So if we were able to design some kind of algorithm to identify every single like ribosome pause site and understand how it changes in like a disease state, we can learn a tremendous amount about the molecular interactions that happen in disease. It will be extremely powerful. So the question is like, why haven't we done that yet? And the answer is that ribosome profiling data looks like this. It's like what we call extremely noisy, meaning it has like a lot of technical random variation that makes it difficult to separate what's like actually important from what's not important. And so I'm not going to go into like detail about how my algorithm works because I think everyone will fall asleep, but basically like it takes noisy data and it makes it no longer noisy, and then it identifies the peaks using some statistics techniques, and then we are very happy. So for example, for this mRNA transcript, my algorithm identified 5 peaks. And these peaks are supposedly ribosome pause sites. So the next thing I did is I compared how my algorithm did against the currently like best algorithm in the field. And basically like my algorithm, the higher number means your algorithm was like better or more consistent. And my algorithm significantly outperformed the currently like state of the art best algorithm and was 22 times more computationally efficient, which is also good. So in conclusion, I was able, this is not supposed to be here, but this is just like me applying my algorithm to look at some like biological patterns within the data. Specifically, I was looking at which amino acids are most commonly expressed in the like in paused ribosomes, like which amino acids cause ribosomes to pause. This is not even supposed to be here, but for anybody who is curious about biology, that's what this is. And yeah, great. Awesome. Yeah, so it's kind of to finish, I was able to create like an algorithm that identifies these critical points called ribosome pause sites and analyze for researchers how they change across conditions. And so the power of ribobase is that it's able to take this extremely messy and complicated biological data and produce clear biological insights and highlight important patterns within the data that can often be lost in the confusion of the numbers. And the most important thing is that ribobase is generalizable, which means it can be applied to any data set, any disease. If you want to look at pancreatic cancer or like squamous cell carcinoma or like Alzheimer's disease, you can get like data sets from if you can get data sets, you can analyze it with ribobase, and then you can learn more about it. So we can learn more about anything. any protein, any disease. Awesome. So yeah, that's basically my project. Thank you for listening. All right, so now we're gonna move into Q&A. So some people submitted like questions before, or like we pre-collected questions from people for this seminar. So we're going to kind of go through them now and address them. But before that, I see a couple questions in the chat about my presentation. I'll answer them very quickly. So first from Eric, your figures look awesome. What programs did you use to generate? Oh, okay. So these were generated in R Studio. It's like a data science language. And I used a package called complex heat map and ggplot. And then for these were taken like from other papers, hence like the citations. And then in the beginning, this was made using BioRender. BioRender is literally saving my life every day. Yeah, these were also made in RStudio. Okay, and then how'd you get the idea? It was actually, I think this is also asked in the Q&A, but I got the idea from my mentor. So when I applied to RSI, basically like they have you write essays. This was my RSI project, by the way. But they have you write essays. Basically, so okay, just for context, I did this project here in about 6 weeks. And I did it with a mentor from UT Austin. And okay, sorry, I just got distracted. Yeah, so I did this project at RSI in about 6 weeks. And what was the question again? Sorry. Oh yeah. So basically when I applied to RSI, I wrote essays like, what questions are you interested in exploring? And I basically said, oh, like I want to be able to use math to understand biology. Like that was the core of my application, was like using math to understand biology. And then I was somehow accepted. And then they matched me with this mentor who was like, I like to use math to understand biology. And then he was like, how about we look at ribosomes? And I was like, sure. And that was where I got the idea. So it was not like my idea to create an algorithm to look at ribosome pausing, but the methods and like the development of the idea, my mentor and I did together. Okay. All right, let's go to the Q&A now. All right. Does Victor want to talk about this one?
Yeah, so this probably applies to you more than me, but I've been doing science fair projects for a long time, but not really research. So the distinction there is that science fair is so we can make something that perhaps someone has already done before, or perhaps that has been proposed before, but that you might be replicating that, and that can be a science fair project. But for specifically research, you need to be doing something that no one has ever done before. And so that's sort of both the daunting part, but also the exciting part of research is like pushing those boundaries. And to come to think of it, then I've been doing research since 8th grade, or no, my 8th, 9th grade project was also it was, anyway, there's some technical details, but I haven't been doing research for as long as I've said I've been doing science fair, but it's definitely never too late to start research, as long as you can get a mentor who's willing to teach you how to do it, then you'll be good. Amber, you're muted.
Sorry. I'll just pitch in with like my perspective on this. I didn't start research until the summer between 10th and 11th grade. And this research project I did for STS was literally completed like a week before the deadline for STS. So I think it is never too late to start researching. I think like 10th grade is pretty late to start research, at least like from what I've observed, but I know like a lot of people who like RSI was their first research project. So it's never, ever, ever too late to start research. Like I would say it's only too late to start if it's like literally a month before STS. And then again, like and I'm talking like doing research for the purpose of STS, which I think should not be the purpose of research. But anyway, like it's never too late to start research. And if you plan on doing research like as a career or in college, then it's literally never too late. So yeah, let's go on. Does my school need to have a research program for me to do research? No. Okay, so just for like, I mean, my school had a research program, and I think it was somewhat helpful. Like it taught me how to cold email, and I got a bit of practice like presenting. And it organized like my application to STS and organized like ISEF and everything. So it can certainly be helpful for a school to have a research program, but I know most schools don't. And it's certainly not a requirement anyway. Like all of the research opportunities that I got were totally unrelated to my school's research program. The only thing that it helped me with was applying to research programs, or no, sorry, not research programs, applying to science fairs and things like that.
Yeah. For me, my school never had a research program. We did have a science fair club. However, that was mostly to organize like filling out forms. It wasn't like to actually help you with your science fair project. And so coming from that science fair background and really finding out how to do research from my mentor and from my own experiences. So it's definitely not a requirement for your school to have a research program for you to do research. If you're able to reach out, as Amber said, cold emailing works. And summer programs, anything that can get you started in research and not necessarily from your school.
All right, so I see a lot of questions in the chat. I think we'll come back to those after we answer these pre-collected questions. Okay, so
We might cover some.
What's up?
We might cover some of these.
Yeah, in the pre-collected questions. All right, can I do research without a mentor? I think we already talked about this. Yes. I don't know, like, I haven't. I know of some people, I think some people at STS did their research without a mentor. Am I right about that?
I don't know. I'd have to ask.
I feel like, I don't know. I know of some people who definitely have done research without a mentor. I know somebody who won an ISEF grand prize with a computational biology project without a mentor. I mean, that's crazy. Like, if you're really good at Python or R, I think it's 100% possible to like do a project and make it to ISEF or STS. At least like for me, I feel like if I started research like a year earlier, I would feel confident doing research without a mentor. But I don't know how it is for like wet lab engineering based things. But I think like if you're thinking computational, I think it's certainly possible, as long as you have a very strong grasp of fundamental programming and data analysis.
Yeah, for engineering, I guess like a mentor can help. Personally, most of my science fair projects have been individual things that I've been tinkering at home. And I think that's where a lot of engineering students start, like tinkering at home. But definitely going into research, having a mentor can help, though it's not like something that you have to have.
Yes. Okay.
Also, it is also you don't have to have a mentor to but we already covered that, but you don't have to have a mentor for STS. You don't have to have a mentor for ISEF. Those aren't requirements.
Okay, next one. What advice would you give to a 9th grader who wants to start research? Oh, that's a big question. Let's see. My advice, honestly, it depends on what you're interested in. But I'm gonna talk about like my interests. I'm gonna pretend like this 9th grader is interested in biology/computer science. Honestly, like my advice would be, don't start research until you feel like you have a strong fundamental knowledge base to do research. Like one of my biggest pet peeves is when people like do a research project, but then when you start to ask them questions about the theory or the background behind their research, they don't know anything. That is, I think, like the crime of research. So honestly, like as a 9th grader, I feel like there are very few 9th graders out there who have enough fundamental knowledge to like contribute in a novel way to a field. This is what I believe. So I think like if you're a ninth grader, my advice to you would, if you want to start research, would be to start studying. Like read a textbook, read research papers, like do an Olympiad, do science Olympiad if you can. Like find something that interests you, that calls to you. Find questions that fascinate you. And then like once you have this fundamental knowledge base to do research, then you can start. And like what I mean by this is like, for example, if I were to do my research in ribobase before I started studying for USIPO, I would be so lost. I would be like, you know, what is RNA-seq? How do you sequence this? How do these sequencing technologies work? And like what is ribosome pausing, and like how does protein folding contribute to ribosome? Like I would be so lost, and maybe I would be able to design this algorithm, but in the end I would not be able to write a paper explaining to people why it matters, right? And I feel like it's extremely important to develop that knowledge base before you start doing research. And then my secondary advice, once you have that knowledge base, would be start cold emailing and start organizing your stuff to apply to like summer research programs. That's pretty much my advice.
Yeah, my advice is probably going to differ just because of the being in engineering rather than bio. I think with bio and math specifically, those are sort of fields where you have to have that strong knowledge base, and things like sort of build on each other very much. And so if you really don't know how previous research in biology, what that has dug up, then it's very hard to get to the frontier there. With engineering, it's a little bit of a different approach, since usually engineering questions are, I don't want to say they're unrelated, but like they're like their own thing. Like I found the radar community to be very different from the people doing solar panels and renewable energy, or the people doing other sorts of mechanical engineering. So engineering is a little bit different, but I do think it is important, at least for engineering, to have a solid math base, a solid physics base, and that can certainly come from things like the Math Olympiad, which comes up from the AMC series, or Physics Olympiad, and really having that solid scientific base and knowing where the current frontier is before you start pushing it. So also to reiterate what Amber said, you should know the background behind your the field you're researching. You should know what other people have done, where they have what they have tried, what they have failed at, and really knowing that part before you start trying to overcome those limitations.
Yes. All right. Definitely. For me, like before I started doing my RSI project, which is the one I just talked about, I didn't know anything about ribosome profiling. Absolutely nothing. Had never heard of it. But I knew other sequencing techniques, and I knew a lot of molecular biology. I knew a lot of genetics. So based on that, I was able to very quickly pick up ribosome profiling. Like I read like maybe like 5 papers, and I feel like I had a very good grasp of it by then. So I think like having the intuition for something like biology is very helpful. Anyway, so moving forward, what prepared you for the deep knowledge required for your research? This is kind of like similar in a way to my answer to the previous question, but a little different. So for my research projects, I used several programming languages like R, MATLAB. I think I used R, MATLAB. That was like pretty much it. And then obviously I needed to know a lot of biology. So I think for R, I learned R via a summer program. The first one I did, I used R for like some basic statistical analysis, multiple linear regression. This was in the summer between 10th and 11th grade at MathWorks HSMC. And that's what I learned, like the basics of R. But honestly, I feel like R is like something you can just learn from a textbook. But yeah, and then as for things like MATLAB, I actually just like learned it on the way. Like as I did the project, I learned how to use it. And then obviously for biology, I definitely like Science Olympiad, Biology Olympiad. Those were like essential for preparing me for research.
Yeah, definitely with like knowing programming languages. I mean, that can help. Sometimes you just have to learn it along the way. Personally, I mostly use GNU Radio for my radar project. GNU Radio is very specific to electrical engineering and with radio systems. And so I of course had to pick that up on the spot. But like Amber said, I didn't know anything about my own project and the field of radar before I started researching it. And so really with getting a deep knowledge of the field is in reading papers and reading other people's work in it and figure out where you can help contribute to the field and where it needs people like you to step in and push the frontier.
Agreed. Okay, next question. Is it ever too late to start the STS application? Okay, here we have a very good answer for this one. Wait, crap. Okay. Yes, it is definitely too late. Or well, there's definitely a point in which it's too late to start the STS application. But I think that that point at which it's too late can be pushed, but I would not recommend pushing it. Like for me, I didn't start my STS application until like I think a week before it was due. Well, I asked for my letters. Okay, so for me, what I did is I asked for my letters at the beginning of 12th grade. And then I like took a look at the essays and I kind of like outlined them, but I didn't write anything because I was like dying at the beginning of the school year. And then like a week or two before the deadline, I was like, oh crap, like I have to write these essays. Oh, and the paper. Okay, so I think the most time-consuming parts of the application are the paper and the essays. My paper was done by the time RSI ended. I made like some revisions, actually some pretty major revisions, in October. But my paper was done like more than a week before the deadline. And I only made minor revisions in the days leading up to the deadline. But the thing that took the most stress for me was the essays. I actually don't know how important the essays are. I assume they're like somewhat important, but I think the paper is like what's the most important. But for me, like I started my essays, I think a week before the application was due, and I had to skip 3 days of school to finish them. And I barely finished at that. Like it's insane. There are so many essays. Like I don't know why there's so many essays, but there are very many. And it's because like you care a lot about this STS thing, you agonize over each essay. And so like give yourself time. Don't be like me. Don't write your essays in 3 days. Like it's just not healthy for you. It's not healthy for your application. Like start writing your essays early. Obviously ask for your recommendation letters like very early. And make sure you let your teachers know like what STS is, why it's important, and stuff like that.
Yeah, just to pitch in, of course, don't be like Amber, don't start like that late. Personally, I think I started like maybe around this time. Because the thing is like once you get into the school year and also with like college applications, these are all like around the same time. And so if you can really start this earlier, that will help you out a lot. Especially with the getting the rec letters. You want to give your teachers and especially mentors plenty of time to get that in. I think Amber, your mentor took like forever to get some approval, or
Oh,
I forget
yeah.
exactly.
Right. That's important. There's like IRB approvals or something. Like you have to at least your mentors have to do something. Mentors are always busy. So ask them like way in advance. Yeah, I had a problem with something. I don't really remember what it was now, but don't have problems. If you do things early, you won't have problems.
Or at least you have the time to solve them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 100. Yeah, my application was about 100 pages total. It's really long. Like really, really, really long.
I think
And I
mine came out
remember,
to 90 some.
yeah, maybe we should like make a Discord server for people who want to apply to STS. Honestly, that would be a good idea. Maybe. Okay. Anyway, next one. What is your inspiration driving your research? I feel like we answered this already.
Yeah.
Like, should we not answer it again? I kind of want to get to the questions in the chat.
Yeah, they'll have the recording. Yeah.
True. Okay. What science classes should I take in high school and when? Okay. In my very not professional opinion, I think that the science classes, at least for me, the science classes I took in high school, like contributed absolutely maybe like 1% to my maybe like 0.1% to my research, a very little amount. And I think the reason for that is like when you do research, it's so deep that like anything you learn in your science classes can only provide that fundamental base. And I think like ultimately to do research, obviously to get that knowledge, you have to read papers or do an Olympiad of some kind. I think like I took AP Physics C and AP Biology this year, and then last year I took AP Chem and AP Physics 1. None of them helped me with my research, but in terms of like just like in general, what science classes to take AP Statistics like as soon as you can. This is like my one recommendation about classes is to take stats like as soon as you can. Whatever field you're in, at least if it's like computational or even if it's wet lab, like you're gonna need to know stats. Like you're gonna need to know what a p-value is, what a z-score is, what an adjusted p-value is, what confidence intervals are. Like AP stats is like the only class I took in high school that helped me in my research, and it helped me tremendously. So I should revise my earlier statement to say that AP stats is critical. Everything else, I don't know, like calculus BC is important if you want to do like modeling of things. Like you need to know calculus. I think if you want to do like some electrical engineering, probably like AP Physics C is helpful, but Victor probably can speak more to that. And then like AP Computer Science A can give you like basic coding knowledge, but in terms of like in general, what science classes, take AP classes if your school offers them. Take AP stats. Okay, those are my recommendations.
Yeah. Amber, I think you're right with like that high school science classes are probably not going to be particularly useful towards the research end, since these are like if you were learning it in high school, then it's probably nowhere near the frontier of the actual field. But maybe like at the very basic level. But with math and stat and things like that, those will probably be somewhat useful in pretty much any science field. So definitely have AP classes in those BC and AP Calc BC and stats. I only took stats in 12th grade, so and personally, I didn't do all that much with any statistical analysis, but if your field does require more of that, then it's definitely something you should get out of the way, or not out of the way, but get done as soon as possible.
And some people are asking about my math classes. I took AP Calc BC in 9th grade, and then my school offered multi-variable calc, so I took that in 10th grade, and then I took differential equations in 11th grade. I know most schools like don't offer such advanced math classes, so like I would say just like follow whatever is traditional for your school. I think unless you're doing like, actually taking DiffyQ helped me a lot with my like synthetic biology research. But other than that, I don't think it's too important. Okay. And then, sorry. Did I just happen?
Yeah, we're back.
All right. Okay. How do you find time to prepare all the academic competitions outside of school? Yeah, this is a really, really, really like $1 million question. How do you make the time for everything? So yeah, for me at least, like I was Science Olympiad captain, math team president. I was like running this nonprofit organization, and at the same time, I had to study for Olympiads and do research and like do my schoolwork. Like I honestly don't know how I survived high school, to be honest with you, but I like, okay, take these tips use them with your discretion, because it will not work for everyone. But the way I managed to balance everything was that I would do like my research or study for Olympiads during my classes. And like, this is why this is not good advice, but I did other things in class. This is an honest answer. And then I would study for my exams independently, because I feel like some classes spend like a whole week to teach you like circuits. I feel like you could maybe learn that on your own faster. So what I would do is like I would do other things in class. Like whenever I had free time in class, like I would work on other things. So that's something I don't know if I recommend. It's really up to you, and it's up to your teachers. Like some teachers don't like that, and that's totally valid for them not to like that. And it's up to you to decide. But I think like doing other work in my classes like actually saved me. It gave me so much extra time, but like be very careful, because a lot of teachers will not like that. And also like your grades might slip, so be careful. And then the other big actual like recommendation is use a calendar. This is extremely, extremely important. I use Google Calendar. If you have a MacBook, you should have like a calendar app. I planned out like every single day. Not like down to the hour, but I would essentially use the calendar as like a to-do list. I would put down like edit paper, like read 20 pages of Albert's molecular biology of the cell. Like I would put these things into my calendar, and I wouldn't sleep until I finished everything for that day. And sometimes like I like it's very good way to like organize your time. You can put all your deadlines on there, your schoolwork, things like that. Definitely use a calendar. If you're not using a calendar now, like start as soon as you can, because I used to like look down on people who use calendars, but now I'm like absolutely addicted to my calendar. I think it's extremely important. The last thing is sleep schedule. I think is also somewhat related to this. At least like for me, this is honestly the very honest answer to this question would be that I did not sleep very much. But in hindsight, I think sleep is very important. I think it's important to find a balance between your health and the stuff you do like in school and things like that, because during junior year and senior year too, I was like, oh, like, I'm fine sleeping 2 to 3 hours a night. But now like I'm definitely feeling the effects of that. Like I feel burnt out a lot. I feel tired. I feel not motivated sometimes. So know that like any sleep you lose now is sleep you're gonna have to pay back. But again, like it's up to you to decide whether you want to sacrifice your sleep, and I certainly did. So yeah. Okay.
Just gonna say, or I have a couple of things to say, but one thing is, I think there's research out there that says like sleep that can't be repaid, and that it just like permanently affects you for the rest of your life. But don't take my word for that. I heard it somewhere. I might look into that, but but I was gonna say with the calendar thing, it's definitely good to start as early as you can. And with time management, really the thing is, if you have a lot of stuff going on, not just being able to put it into your calendar, but also being able to manage how much you can reasonably do in one day, and adjusting your
I'm so sorry, guys.
adjusting what you have scheduled so that you're able to get everything done. And that really comes with experience. So if it's your first time using to-do lists and calendars to organize your time, that can really help you with how much you're that you're actually able to get done.
Yes. Okay, great. Let me see. So real quick, I saw a question in the chat that I feel like I need to address. I think it's a very interesting question. Do you do any social media stuff that all girls are doing now? And the answer is to an extent, yeah. At least like I don't know what you mean by like social media stuff, but at least I do a lot of like things that are not related to work. Like I played too much Pokemon. I played Genshin Impact. I spend way too much time on Discord. Like, yeah, I waste a lot of time. But in terms of like, I don't think you should sacrifice your social life for research. At least I never felt like I had to do that. I think like, yeah, sometimes I had to say no. Okay. Yeah, sometimes like my friends would say, hey, I want to go ice skating. I'm like, sorry, I can't go. I have to work on this or that. But for the most part, I think like if you find that your social life is greatly suffering because of academic things, it's not worth it. Like you only get to do high school once. So like do it right. And like yeah, I have an Instagram. I do a lot of quote unquote like social media stuff. But I think like most of the wasted time was like on Discord. But I would argue that time on Discord is never time wasted. Anyway. Okay.
Yeah, with social media,
What?
sorry.
What was that?
With social media, I think it's good to have it, especially if you're going to use it to connect with people, or to like even just to like follow your friends and see what they're up to. But I think it's important that you stay off of content that's just like there to waste your time and there so that they can show you ads and make money. So like TikTok is probably not recommendable. But definitely I think Instagram is perhaps the most widely used for really keeping up with friends, or as Amber uses all the time, Discord. So sort of just watch what you're doing on social media, and that can help you manage your time as well.
Yeah, so I was like joking about TikTok. I don't like TikTok that much, but I think if your daughter or son is like addicted to social media, it's very common. I honestly feel like it's a hard problem to deal with, and like if I had an answer, I feel like that would be groundbreaking. For me at least, like as soon as I found my passion, like as soon as I started like doing biology, I feel like I didn't want to do other things. Like at least I remember in junior year, like all of my friends would be like playing Valorant, playing League of Legends, PUBG, and I used to love to do that too. But like as soon as I started doing research in biology, I found out that I like to do those things more. And so like I didn't want to like play games or things like that. And I feel like it just happened naturally. And I think once you find out that you want to accomplish something, like that's the most natural and best way to be not addicted to social media. It's like when you find out you want to get something done. So yeah, I that's like my answer. There's really no answer to this. Yeah, get addicted to, yeah, exactly, get addicted to research. Okay, all right, so next, oh yeah, okay. Sorry that this is going so over time, by the way. I don't know how that happened. Okay, so for this one, what do you think is the most important reason that you got selected as a STS finalist? I think for me, it was definitely the paper. I think that's it, probably the same answer that you'll get from everyone. But I think another thing that STS looks for is like what differentiates STS from other competitions is that, or other research competitions, is that they don't only look at your research, they're also looking at you as a holistic scientist. So things like starting a nonprofit, like they want to find people that will have impact. STS is a highly publicized like talent search thing, right? So like the people that will be representing this talent search are quote unquote the leaders of science. At least that's what they want to market us as, right? So if you have done something like founded a nonprofit, like I know Victor has done like viola stuff, right? I founded a nonprofit. I know almost every single finalist this year had done some kind of community service or founded an organization of some sort. I think that is also very important. And it's definitely something they consider. And another thing I think they consider is your achievements. I'm not super sure on that, but there seemed to be a very like strong correlation between like Olympiad finalists and being an STS finalist. Again, like that could just be correlation, not causation, but I do think that they look at least they ask you to list your achievements. So I assume that that's also factored into the application.
Yeah, basically they want to find the best of the best. The people who will be, in their opinion, will be pioneering various fields of science in the future. And they have like all these lists of like how many Nobel Prize winners have been STS finalists and all those sorts of things. And so that's sort of their goal here. So you want to present yourself as someone who's able to step into that role, not only in research, but also in various science achievements, being a good leader and a caring person who really wants to push forward the frontiers of science. Although to answer the question, I don't think there's really one most important reason, but rather all taken together, you being a genuinely scientific person who has potential to be the leaders in the future.
Yes, agreed. Okay, how many more of these do we have? Oh, just one more. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so there's just one more. Great. Yeah, apparently this was a question for me. How and when did you prepare for the USIBO? Well, yeah, that's a big question. But basically, I started preparing, and I would say I started preparing in 10th grade, and then I don't actually remember. At least the first time I made camp was in junior year. And I think I know. Yeah, I started preparing in junior year. Okay, so yeah, I started preparing for the USIBO around like March of 2020, which was like the COVID-19 summer. I had nothing to do that summer. Or at least like I had a research project, but I had a lot of like free time still that summer. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to start reading Albert's Molecular Biology of the Cell because that's what people do when they have free time. So then I started reading it and I was like, wow, this is like really interesting. And then I was like, why don't I do the USIBO? I also done Science Olympiad in the past. So I already like was kind of in that like Olympiad mindset, if that makes sense. So I was like, oh, like I might as well start studying for the USIBO. So I read a lot of textbooks. I think junior year, I studied like many hours. I think between like during the summer, I think I studied like 2 to 3 hours a day. During the school year, I think it went up to like 3 to 4 probably hours a day during junior year. So junior year I studied a lot. I read like I think 5 different textbooks, and then I made it to camp that year, but I was not able to go because it conflicted with RSI. And then senior year I also continued to prepare. And I think senior year, like junior year, I had a very good study schedule. I would each day, this is how I prepared. Each day I would sit down at this desk that I'm sitting at right now, and I would read like, I put a set number of pages to read each day. So I had like a schedule of like, I'm going to finish this textbook on this date and this textbook on this date, or like I'm going to read this number of chapters. And so each day I read like anywhere between 20 and 40 pages a day. And I didn't miss, like, I think it's extremely important to be consistent. Like, I didn't miss a single day of reading every single day. Like, no matter how busy I was, if it was like 2 a.m., I was like, I have to read. Like, it was every single day I would read. And at the same time, I also like took practice tests. I took practice tests like kind of on a whim, like, oh, like I want to take a practice test now. But I think for the reading, there's like 5 different textbooks. Maybe somebody who is familiar with USABO can put them in the chat, or I can do that too. But there's like 5 different textbooks that traditionally people read for USABO. And basically, like, I read those 5, and that was pretty much all. I also took a lot of practice tests, but that's how I prepared. And then consistent reading every single day. And then junior year, I think I read like probably like 2 weeks of reading for like 5 hours because I didn't have that much time. So I had to compact all my reading into like a couple weeks. But yeah, it's a lot of reading. Honestly, most of it's reading, but then at a certain point, like after you've read the textbooks many times, it turns more to like being able to apply that knowledge to solve more difficult critical thinking based problems. So yeah. All right. Any other questions? That would be the questions in the chat. All right, so let's go all the way back to find the questions that we missed.
I think it should be right after you said biorender.
Okay. Hold on, I have a couple direct
Oh,
messages.
could you also go to the next slide so they can see the YouTube channel?
Right.
Yeah.
There's a YouTube channel. Oh, I know Zihongbo Wang. Anyway, I think he did RSI this year. Anyway, so let's go through these. I got a question. What is the summer program Discord link? Oh crap. I have it, but it's like I don't have Discord on this computer. If you guys add me on Discord, I can give you links for summer programs and stuff like that. Okay. And then let's see. Somebody asked me, is the research you presented from RSI? Yes, that was my RSI research project. Then did you have a research project before you got into RSI? Kind of. So like before I got into RSI, I did do a research project the summer before at MathWorks HSMC. Basically it was like computational epidemiology, something to do with COVID-19, and I presented my research at a consortium, I don't know how to say it. And I also wrote a full-length manuscript that was published in an archive. So yeah, I did do a research project before I got into RSI, and I got like a rec letter from a mentor. And I think the paper also, like, I was first author and corresponding author for that paper. So I think it was actually a big component of how I was able to get into RSI. Wait, let's go where biorender. Question for Victor and Amber. Are you planning to submit your research to an academic journal conference? Victor, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, I sort of did it the other way. I first submitted it to a conference, and that was how I first found my mentor, of course, and then continued my project up to the STS. But I definitely think conferences are good for really first getting to know people who are experts in the field and who are pushing it forward, but also with getting your own name out there, and for looking for people who might be able to mentor you.
Yeah, I think for me, I did submit my research to a couple conferences. Yeah, I did do that, but ultimately, I think it was I think I did one conference. And then I was rejected from Recom, which is like the biggest computational biology conference in the nation or something. But even though I was rejected, they gave me really detailed comments, and I think that was extremely helpful for like fixing my paper and my algorithm. So yeah, and I do plan to publish it in a journal. Actually, that is like probably gonna happen soon. So very excited. Yeah. When did you start? I started my RSI/STS project in the summer between 11th and 10th grade, or 11th and 12th grade. So about July of 2021. And in my opinion, like, what grade do you think we should start finding mentors? Like, honestly, I
don't
didn't,
think this is set.
yeah, yeah. For me, I think it differs person to person. I don't think there's like a specific best grade to start. But as a general benchmark, like I think most people start in like 10th grade.
10th, 11th, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Anything, okay. Should you have an idea for a project before or after contacting a mentor? For me, I did not have an idea for a project before I contacted my mentor. Like never. I never did. I was always just like, oh, my interests are very broad because I feel like, especially in computational biology, there's so many interesting questions to answer that like there's not any specific one that I was like, I really want to answer this. Like my interest was less about ribosome profiling, but rather about like understanding molecular biology with math. It was like a very broad interest. And I didn't care if I did that via single cell technology or ribosome profiling or bulk RNA-seq. Like I didn't care what it was. I just cared about the general problem. So the answer is like not really.
I think that's like very specific to your field because like computation, anything like statistical analysis, algorithms, machine learning, is sort of like applicable to whatever you can apply it to. But like, of course, you have to know the field and the background behind that. What was the question again? Should you have an idea for a project before or after contacting a mentor? I mean, I guess it really depends on who you're looking to ask. Like if you're looking to ask a professor and you're not like cold even emailing a professor and you don't necessarily know what their current projects are, or if they might start a new one with you, then you might not have an idea. But if you do have ideas, I do think that mentors would be open to you providing ideas so that they don't have to think about it themselves. But definitely very situational.
All right, what's the next question?
Is doing science fair in middle school important for gaining more experience? Personally, I've done science fairs since elementary school, and I think they've been useful as like a precursor to research. But like Amber, you said that you haven't done science fair until like 12th grade. So yeah. Any suggestions for a rising senior who is looking for a research opportunity? I think the same stuff still applies. Like it's the same, the camps we've talked about, and with cold emailing, anything of that sort will that can secure you a research opportunity. It's sort of the same stuff. Although I think for rising senior, you're getting into college apps. So hopefully you've secured research before that. I think the sweet spot for research is really that summer before senior year. So like between 11th and 12th grade is a good spot to aim for, being like the pinnacle of your really the entire high school experience.
All right, so what was the question I just answered? Sorry, I was going through my DMs.
Yeah, any suggestions for a rising senior who is looking for a research opportunity?
Okay, yeah, I think you mostly covered what I would have said. I got a direct message there Great research. How long has this project been? Was it done during the summer or during the school year? Yeah, I think I answered this already, but it was about, well, okay, it was like 6 weeks during the summer, but I continued to like work on it a little bit during the school year. So in total, it was like 4 months, during the summer and during the school year. Which publications did you submit your research papers to? I don't know if I'm allowed to disclose. I submitted it to Recom conference, and to another conference called Bioinformatics. And then I also submitted it to a journal. So I got a question, how long did it take to take your prior research at RSI and turn it into an STS submission? Oh, okay. It took like about a week. Like basically the only thing I had to do was write my essays, which was obviously the longest part. And I also, STS has like slightly different requirements for the paper length compared to RSI. So I had to like cut down a little bit. And then I also wanted to polish my manuscript, but in total it took about a week. But it was a week of like working very intensely. Like I skipped a lot of days of school. So if I didn't, work so intensely, maybe like 3 weeks to do that, like in a sane way. Yeah. I think one thing about like RSI, sorry, I think they're trying to gear RSI, and I don't know if this is the same for other programs, but increasingly like RSI is gearing its program towards like specifically to produce STS finalists. I don't know how to feel about that. I don't know if I'm allowed to say how I feel about that. But I think that's something to keep in mind, is like a lot of programs will try to match the STS requirements. Yeah. Okay. Oh, this is a long question. If I have a paper published in a famous but not top CS conference, does the work have to be the same quality as the project or have the better quality? In other words, if I have the ability to publish a paper, I mean, I feel like that's something we can't really like say for sure. I think if your work has been recognized by professionals to have a big impact, then yes, it has high potential to do well in these science fairs. I think for ISEF, like my answer would be yes, I think you would have a relatively good chance of becoming an ISEF finalist. STS is different because that's like a holistic evaluation of you as a scientist, and it's not like only about your research. But my answer is like I can't really say, but I think certainly there is a correlation between having a good project and being able to become a finalist.
I mean, for ISEF, like mentioning that you've gone to a conference isn't going to help you necessarily. STS will definitely be interested in that. So if you have that, definitely add that to the application. They'll like that a lot. But from like a chance standpoint, it's really hard to say. Like it's almost sort of a different skill between writing papers and being able to present them. So that really depends on the nature of the conference or journal, if you're in proceedings or something like that. But I would say definitely having a published paper is beneficial regardless.
Yep, definitely. And then I see someone asked for my Instagram. Sure. Whatever. Yes, hashtag follow me on Instagram. Personal plug. Okay, anyway. Where were we?
100 pages altogether. That's for the when you finish your STS application, you have the option to download a PDF version. And so I have that PDF. And that thing is like 90 some pages, I think like 95 or something. But like that also includes like all the questions, all the prompts for all the essays. Also keep in mind that that 100 pages includes your research paper. So that's like 20 pages of it. So it's not also it's not 100 pages of straight writing, because they also have all the multiple choice questions on there, and or for like choosing entering your info and different things they want to know about you that aren't necessarily essays. So it's not like 100 pages of paper, but definitely be wary that it's long.
Yeah. All right. So this is my favorite question here, which is, did you have free time in high school? If so, how much free time did you have? I feel like I had after 11th grade, I had no free time. Like I wish my answer was like, yeah, I had free time, but I actually like did not have free time. Yeah, I just didn't have free time. But I feel like I never was like sad about that because I think I was like so happy with the things that I was doing that I didn't care that I didn't have like quote unquote free time. Like I think like I loved doing research and like studying for Olympiads so much that it became like my hobby. And I was happier doing that than playing Genshin Impact. So I had some free time. Like sometimes I would like go ice skating with my friends. It's not like I didn't have like any free time, but I certainly did not have very much free time. After, yeah, especially in junior year, like I had absolutely no free time. Yeah.
Personally, and I'm making this up on the spot, but I don't think it's really a good idea to call something free time, because if you're saying that it's free, then you're implying that you're doing nothing with it. And from a scheduling standpoint, you should probably be even scheduling your free time and how you use that. That doesn't mean that I necessarily follow my own schedule or that I do that. But I do find that I still had a reasonable amount of free time, even during college application season. But really making sure that you're that the important stuff comes first, and that any time left over that you use it wisely.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, I feel like I agree with you. Like I feel like I didn't have free time by choice. Like I think if I wanted to have free time, I could have had a lot of free time. Like, does that make sense? I think, yeah, I agree with your answer. I got a question of what do you want to study in college? So I'm going to MIT. So I'm going to study 6-3. Okay, I'm not gonna use the numbers. No. I'm gonna study computer science and applied math. I don't know. People might be like wondering why I'm not doing biology in college. At least for me, like I feel like I want to specialize in something. Like I'm interested in computation, whether it's in biology or in chemistry or like finance or public health. Like I'm interested in computation. And I feel like originally I was gonna like kind of like major in or like I was originally gonna do an interdisciplinary major with computer science and biology, but then I realized like if I do that, then I'm getting like half computer science and half biology, and I'm not really specialized in anything. I think what's really important to do when you choose your major is to specialize in something. Be a really good computer scientist or be a really good biologist. Don't be a mediocre computer scientist and a mediocre biologist. That's like my 2 cents. I don't know if Victor has any thoughts.
Yeah, personally, I'm going to Harvard to study electrical engineering. And I'm looking into the concurrent master program. I do think it's very important that you're really good at one thing, because that's what will set you apart from other people. That will make you really special, and that I'll say it this way: employers can't replace you very easily. So whether that's in, and usually it'll be like a subfield, especially if your field's rather broad. So like computer science is very broad, so you might want to be specifically an expert in, say, security, or specifically in machine learning, or whatever field very specifically, and that will, whether you do end up doing something that is more joint, say between machine learning and biology, or machine learning and chemistry, then you will have that skill.
Okay, what's the next question?
I'm not sure where you found that question. That might have been in your
Yeah.
private.
Yeah. Oh yes, Genshin. Genshin's great. Hashtag I like Razor, the electric guy. Okay, I'm gonna stop. How did you prepare for USIBO and Scioli? I was self-taught. I think I talked a little bit about how I prepared for USIBO, but kind of going back to that, there's like a set of books that most people read. Some people fight over which books you should read, but I think in general, like Campbell's Biology is the first one. Read it cover to cover. And then Vander's Human Physiology is my recommendation for the second book to read. And then I think after that, like you can take practice tests. And then based on that, like there's practice tests online. There's previous open exams, previous semifinals, previous IBO exams are actually like really good practice. Like even if you're like not gunning for IBO, I think the IBO exams just have really good problems. And then after that, like take some exams, figure out what you're weak in. And then if it's like genetics, then read Brooker's. If it's plants, then read Raven's. And then just like, you know, work on like read consistently, take tests. That's my recommendation. For Science Olympiad, I prepared. Okay, so for example, for anatomy and physiology, I prepared by reading a textbook to get like the fundamental knowledge base. And then I took practice tests, and then I refined my note sheet. Like I created a note sheet based on a textbook, and then I took practice tests, and whenever I didn't know anything, I would add that into my note sheet, and then my note sheet would kind of like automatically create itself. That's how I prepared for my Science Olympiad events. For things like Codebusters, it's just a lot of practice. For build events, like I don't know how to prepare for them. Clearly I failed every single build event I ever did. But for study events, like read a textbook, create like a base note sheet, and then take a lot of practice tests. Take every single one in your school's drive, and then your note sheet will automatically make itself, I promise. And then for Science Olympiad, my biggest recommendation is to have a note sheet that has 3 columns. That's all. Okay. Like yeah, and then as for tutoring programs, I never did a tutoring program. I've taught 4 tutoring programs, but I've never taken one myself. I think like for Science Olympiad, I don't think it's worth it to do a tutoring program. Well, okay, for Science Olympiad, there is one called Scio Virtual. For Science Olympiad, that's the one I recommend if you want to do tutoring. For USIBO, I recommend this one called Biology. Either one, like okay, Biology for USIBO, Scio Virtual for Science Olympiad. And then also self-plug, Illumina Learning also offers courses, but I think like if you want to do USIBO, Biology is the way to go. Okay. I also got a DM, how much did your parents help you? Like probably I would say like not very much. They gave me food and a place to sleep. And I think that was how much they helped me. I mean, they like I think when it comes to this like kind of pursuit of your passion, I think it's difficult for parents to help with that, but they can help in many other very important ways. Okay, I think I missed a question. What made you stand out when you applied to RSI? That's a question that I still don't know the answer to, honestly. I tried to ask the director why she admitted me, and she would not give me an answer. But I think I think there were 3 main reasons. The first was that I had written a first authored manuscript, and I like basically without a mentor. And then I talked about it in my essays. And the second is that I think my essays were like extremely passionate, so to speak. Like I go back and I read my essays like even today, and I'm like, these are the really good essays. Like, I agonized over those essays. I took 3 weeks to write them. Like, I remember like I would stay up so late, just like fine-tuning every single little word in those essays, because I just really wanted to highlight my fascination with like using math to understand biology. Like, that was a central theme, or like a coherent story in my essays, was like that I was so fascinated with this idea of like modeling something so complex with math. And I think like I was able to express it in a very insightful way in my essays, like in a kind of like artistic / philosophical manner, which I think was quite unique. I took like a philosophical approach to a kind of like abstract question. I don't know, like it's kind of hard to say. I think my essays were unique. And then the last one is I did the MathWorks HSMC, and my year, like 5 out of the 50 domestic students had done that program in the previous year. So I think like maybe like it's a feeder of some kind. At least like that's the rumor that goes around. But yeah, I did MathWorks HSMC, and I think that definitely helped. The last one was that my science Olympiad coach wrote me a 2.5-page recommendation letter. So I think those were the 4 reasons why. I don't know for Victor if he wants to talk about the how did your parents impact your research?
Yeah, personally, like my dad's also an engineer, so that helps a bit. But like really with the brunt of research is you want to be doing it yourself. And parents should mostly be for things like, oh, I need to buy this, can I buy it? Or like as I said, financial reasons. But like really with research, ideally your parents won't be able to help you, because that means you're doing things that other people haven't done before. But yeah, if your parents do help you, you probably will have to acknowledge that in places. So ideally they don't have to.
Yes. Okay. I think we're about done. I have a question. How did you absorb the knowledge from textbooks? Are there any tips for reading them? Yeah. Okay. My tip is I find that knowledge is easier to absorb when you're genuinely invested in absorbing that knowledge, if that makes sense. Like if your school has a science Olympiad team, like do a science Olympiad event, and then like for some reason, like having that, like I feel like, okay, for me, when I do a practice test, for example, and there's like something I don't know, and then I come across it in a textbook, like my focus goes up like 50 notches. I feel like you're more invested in a textbook when like you're interested in the things that it's teaching, or when the things that it's teaching will benefit you in some way. So my answer to that is like, I don't know. There's no like, how do you absorb the knowledge? For me, it was like doing science Olympiad helped me absorb that knowledge, because I had a reason to want to learn. And then as for my tips for reading textbooks, like I read PDFs. I don't read paper copies. I put it on my monitor, and I don't take notes. The first time I read a textbook, I just focus entirely on trying to understand the concepts, and I don't take any notes. The second time I read it, I take notes, or the third time or the fourth time. But the first time you read a textbook, I would say like don't take any notes, because then like you get focused on making your notes pretty and writing things down, and then the knowledge doesn't go into your brain. So the first time you read a textbook, focus on the textbook and don't take notes. Yeah. I answered this one from Byron, but I don't know if Victor wants to talk about it.
Which one is this?
How did you learn to write academic papers?
Oh, I kind of didn't. Like you read, if once you read enough papers, you like get the format, and then you just sort of write it yourself. And about LaTeX, I've never learned LaTeX. I've been using Word. I don't know how I've gotten by without learning LaTeX. You probably should. It's definitely a lot more professional. And I probably should learn LaTeX eventually. But yeah, you can get by just using Word. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
Yeah. All right. I think I'm kind of like I probably need to go soon and eat dinner.
Mhm.
I think we're very much over time, but for people who still have questions that haven't been answered, you can email me, or you can just reach out to me on Discord. I think like either one. I'll answer faster if you contact me through Discord. So yeah, like either one of those will work. All right.
All right. Thank you so much for Victor and Amber. You guys did a wonderful seminar today and explained a lot of things. Okay. I hope everyone has a good night, and then we'll post the recording in both YouTube and WeChat tomorrow.
All right. Thank you all so much for coming. I really enjoyed talking to everyone, and I hope it was helpful.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you.